This video is brought to you by Mando. Go to shopmando.com and use promo code Dan for a special offer, and stay tuned after the review for more info. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell, and today I want to talk to you about box office tracking. And no, this is not an infomercial or a sales pitch. This is about something that you see a lot in news coverage about movies that are about to open, that it's tracking to open to $50 million, or it exceeded tracking, or it lagged behind what tracking was. And a lot of people have asked me, especially on my weekly box office show, Charts with Dan, what exactly is box office tracking? So I want to break down briefly what it is and why I think the system is largely broken. So first of all, what is box office tracking? Well, it began as internal research that was provided to studios by different firms so that they could get an idea of where their movies might open. But over the years, it's become part of the news cycle, largely because studios started to share that information with the media as a way to help build hype for their upcoming movies. Box office tracking is done by companies like NRG, the National Research Group, which is the main tracking vendor used by most studios. And NRG and other groups use things like ticket pre-sales and other awareness measures, things like calling people and asking if they've ever heard of a movie or if they plan to see a movie that's coming out. But as times have changed, NRG and other firms have been criticized for their inability to keep up with things like the impact of social media and their decision to focus on what they call avid moviegoers, which is people that go 6 to 8 times a year, instead of a general movie-going audience. But the biggest weak spot for research firms like NRG has been their reliance on ticket pre-sale numbers. Now, they like things like ticket pre-sales because they represent actual tickets sold, and they can then extrapolate that number into what a movie's actually going to do at the box office, because they assume that the audience is going to act predictably based on who's already bought tickets. But to an increasing degree, a lot of audiences that are buying tickets ahead of time are not acting in a predictable way, either on the high end or the low end. Pre-sales are pretty good at predicting the behavior of what a studio may have called in the past their quote-unquote typical moviegoer, which is an outdated term referring to basically a white guy between 18 to 34 with a movie that has a base in the large metropolitan areas. This is the market that drove Avengers Endgame, for example, which saw its top 5 highest earning theaters all come from Los Angeles and New York. And most Marvel movies and others like it are fairly easy to predict because their demographics are predictable along age, race, and gender lines. Even a movie like Deadpool and Wolverine, which exceeded expectations with a $211 million opening weekend, was still tagged by some analysts to have a potential $200 million opening over a month before its release, while at the same time, the same analysts predicted that Twisters had potential to reach $60 million on the high end, a number that it far exceeded with an $81 million opening. Twisters is actually a great recent example of why box office tracking can't always be relied on. Tracking data suggested an opening weekend of $55 to $60 million on the high end going into opening weekend, then shocked the experts by opening much bigger. So how did Twisters exceed its box office tracking by so much? Well, it acted unpredictably. The top grossing markets for Twisters weren't New York and Los Angeles. They were Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, Oklahoma City, and San Antonio. All markets in what analysts like to collectively refer to as the flyover states, aka places that aren't New York and LA. This was directly referenced in Deadline's coverage of the opening weekend, which credited the flyover states for the success of Twisters and noted that it was performing particularly well in Moore, Oklahoma, the state where the movie is set. What a shocker. The flyover states are credited with the success of lots of movies, including Top Gun Maverick, which overperformed estimates in places like the Midwest and led the film to become one of the most successful movies of the decade. This Deadline article actually managed to refer to them as both the flyover states and the people in them as the quote red state crowd, despite the fact that these states are neither all red, nor do they exist solely for people to fly over them to get to the east or west coast. And listen, it's no surprise that the entertainment industry puts Hollywood and New York at the center of the movie world. It's where most of the studios are, it's where most of the movies are made, it's where most of the stars live, and they are the 2 biggest cities by far in the US. But a lot of people keep falling into the same trap of thinking that because the industry is based in New York and LA, that the audience is always based there too. And to be fair, a lot of grosses for big movies are driven by big turnouts in those 2 big population centers, but they're not only driven by audiences there. And it seems like time after time that industry analysts are caught flat-footed when a movie has an audience base that is somewhere in the middle part of the country between those two cities. But it's not just geographic unpredictability that throws off tracking. Hollywood goes all Pikachu face every time a movie connects outside of the specific audience that tracking can easily predict. I'm talking about movies like Barbie, Wonder Woman, and Girls Trip. Just this summer, Inside Out 2's tracking numbers indicated a $90 million opening, which ballooned to $154 million, driven by a larger than expected turnout in the Hispanic and Latino audience and a big performance in states like Florida. Longlegs was predicted to open in the high single digits last month, but more than doubled its tracking numbers to open at $22 million due to a largely non-traditional online marketing campaign that the trackers couldn't predict the impact of, paired with another big turnout from Hispanic and Latino audiences. In early June, Bad Boys Ride or Die had its tracking adjusted downward to an opening in the $30 million range, with studios optimistic that it might get to $40 million, only for it to open to $56 million. Its main markets, aside from New York and LA, were Houston, Dallas, and Chicago, with the movie's top grossing theater in Atlanta. The flyover states strike again. And it's not just this summer. Back in 2022, Where the Crawdads Sing was tagged for a high single-digit or maybe $10 million opening due to its supposed target audience of women under 25. But the movie opened to $17 million, doubling some tracking estimates, with over half the ticket buyers being women over 25, and 96 of its top 100 theaters coming outside of LA and New York, and 9 of its top 10 markets coming from the South and Midwest. A complete failure to adequately track and predict who was going to show up and see the movie. Meanwhile, this summer has seen more predictable movies underperform its tracking, such as The Fall Guy, which came in under its $30 million tracking number, or If, which also opened lower than the $40 million that was predicted. The trackers expected their expected audience to act predictably, and they didn't. With each passing year, box office tracking seems more and more like an antiquated system based on a model of predictability that's based on young white dudes following the lead of what people in New York and Los Angeles are going to see. And while that is sometimes the case, it is increasingly not always the case. At a minimum, it seems very clear that traditional box office tracking is unable to consistently predict the behavior across all geographical, regional, and gender lines, and has also struggled with the impact of social media as well. As the resident of a flyover state myself, I've started using my own personal metric to try to determine if a movie is going to be a hit, and it's what I like to call the Thursday night test. There aren't a whole lot of critic screenings that happen where I live, so if I'm not able to travel to catch one before a movie opens, I'll usually go on Thursday night at the first screening I'm able to go to so I can get my review up on Friday morning. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes was more full on Thursday than usual and did well this summer. Twisters had a big crowd on a Wednesday night sneak peek, which was my first hint that it may be set to surprise expectations. The Fall Guy was nearly empty, so its disappointing box office opening didn't come as much of a surprise to me. And to put a little bit of skin in the game, I'll tell you that the Wednesday night preview this week of It Ends With Us is nearly sold out, which says to me that this movie may shock a lot of people with its opening weekend. No surprise, it's yet another film that appeals to demographics outside of tracking strengths. Now, I'm not saying that my state is the bellwether for how a movie is going to perform, and I'm also not saying that tracking is completely useless, but what I am saying is that tracking is often covered by various industry outlets and on various sites around the internet as if it is news, when it very much is not news. It is based off of a prediction model that has become somewhat unreliable. If you want to use tracking as a means of setting a baseline expectation, that's fine. As I mentioned, it does still work for lots of different types of movies, but keep in mind that the important thing is how a movie actually does. And I think it's important not to use what I think is often a faulty data model as a way to start writing the narrative of a movie before it even comes out. And really, when it comes to deciding whether a movie is a hit or a miss or is a creative success, you are the final judge of that. Things like box office and tracking numbers are interesting from a financial and an analytical perspective, but they have absolutely nothing to do with the quality of a film. The only person that gets to decide whether a film is good or bad is you. So those are my thoughts on box office tracking. What do you think? Do you still think it has more value? Do you think I'm overestimating the anomalies in the system? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor for this video, Mando. Summer is winding down and it's time to get in that last minute summer trip, or for me, 1 or 2 more road trips to catch a screening for a big summer movie. But I like to travel light, and I hate having to do the math when I'm figuring out what toiletries I can take on a plane. How big's the bottle? Do I have to buy smaller bottles? Do I have to get a small size when I get there? But Mando has you covered and can make travel simple with their 4-in-1 acidified cleansing bar. It's a 5-ounce bar that does the work of a shampoo, face wash, body wash, and deodorant. Plus, you can use it to create a shaving lather, so technically, it's a 5-in-1. Mando is clinically proven to control odor for 24 hours, and their 4-in-1 acidified cleansing bar is formulated with a gentle alpha-hydroxy acid that stops odor at the source. Regular soap can't do that because the pH is too high, which I'd explain further if I'd paid more attention in high school chemistry, but the point is that it was developed by doctors to work. Mando has a special offer going right now. New customers get $5 off of their best-selling starter pack with the code Dan at shopmando.com, and I'm a big fan of the bourbon leather scent because it just kind of makes me feel classy. I don't know. And it's great peace of mind because I know that no matter what my day or my travels throw at me, I won't have to worry about how much I'm sweating or whether I still smell good, because with Mando, I always smell good. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice, like a mini body wash and deodorant wipes. And it also comes with free shipping. And I do have that discount code to help you get hooked on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off of your starter pack. Use code Dan at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Thanks to Mando for sponsoring this video, and thank you for watching. Be sure to stay tuned right here, including for my box office show tomorrow, Charts with Dan, where I'll be talking about the second weekend of Deadpool and Wolverine. And of course, stay tuned for more movie news, reviews, and everything else. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.